Hey everyone, welcome back to True Crime After Dark. So yes, I was headed to bed, but I can't sleep. So I was looking into this Brian Kohberger case. I did some deep dives on this on my old channel, but some new updates are come up in the case, and they are now making a Lifetime movie about this case. Cannot wait to see it, but there's some new updates, so I want to hear what they are, and I want you guys to react to it along with me. This is a horrific murder of 4 college students. I'm sure everybody's heard about it, but it's like the most horrific murder in present time. So let's get into the video. Before we do, please leave a like, subscribe, and those of you that are subscribed, thank you very much. It helps me out tremendously. All right, without further ado, let's get into it.
Stabbed over 30 plus times, and she was struck, and there was quite a bit of damage to her face. So this guy's just an absolute monster.
And that's the father of Kaylee Gonzalez after the sentencing, talking about what his daughter Kaylee went through. Right now we're going through some of the newly released and unsealed evidence in the case. So let's check back with Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas. Cody, what did we learn about the victim's nail clippings in this case?
Well, they were an important part of this case too, Vinny. Those nail clippings were taken into testing during each of the 4 victims' autopsies, which took place on November 18th of 2022, just 5 days after the stabbings, the killings occurred. Now, the biggest takeaway from those nail clippings, you see them on your screen there. You can see the blood under the nails shown there. All 4 of them tested positive for blood. Now, the document didn't specify whose blood, whether it was theirs, whether it was the killer's blood, but you can see there's blood nonetheless. And, you know, the blood is a little bit more visible on some of the girls' nail clippings. Maybe that's because the girls grew their nails a bit longer, but you can see blood on all 4 of those nails. You can see the highlighted areas that investigators and forensic experts swab to test for blood and test for DNA. Now, Vinny, in cases like this where fingernails are tested for DNA, that could be because there's an assumption that the victim may have fought back. And we know in this case, there were reports of Kaylee Gonzalez having defensive wounds. Now let's take a look at some of the autopsy findings for Kaylee's autopsy, Kaylee Gonzalez. She had 20 plus stab wounds, sharp force injuries, asphyxial injuries, blunt force injuries. Fatal injuries included lacerations in her left lung and liver, subdural bleeds, a stab behind her clavicle that cut her subclavian vein and artery. Just atrocious wounds, an atrocious thing that was done to this young woman, Vinny. And Kaylee's sister, Olivia, talked about Kaylee's wounds on TikTok. She went to TikTok and posted about it. She says the state had planned to introduce this autopsy information in the trial. Take a listen.
Some of the wounds that were made to Kaylee were described as experimental. So a wound that might typically, in its presentation, look defensive, might not have necessarily been defensive. He was inflicting wounds that, I mean, any logical person would know wouldn't be fatal. There was evidence that he continued the attack after she was no longer even fighting back.
And Vinny, hearing her say that word experimental, that kind of makes a shiver go down your back, just trying to think about what was actually going down in that house that night that all 4 of those innocent, wonderful young students were taken from this planet.
Kaylee was the one that was the most hurt in this case. When the thing happened, she had the most stab wounds. It seemed like he went after her. Seems like he had something against her. We never got to find out because there was never a trial. He never gave a motive. He never spoke at court. He never spoke at sentencing, so we don't know, but it's horrific what happened to these students.
Absolutely. Thanks, Cody. All right, that brings us to the next question in our investigation, and let's talk about those clippings that were analyzed. What do the nail clippings tell us about what happened? Do they tell any sort of a story? Here to help with our investigation, still with us, forensic death investigator Joseph Scott Morgan, also the host of the very popular Body Bags with Joseph Scott Morgan podcast. And also joining us, news director, reporter, and storyteller from EastIdahoNews.com, Nate Eaton. Nate, so there's nothing directly connecting the killer to the actual victims, right? There was no, the nail clippings, there wasn't that DNA. There was no talk of anything like that. Am I correct in my analysis of the information that's been made public so far?
Right, no smoking gun that says Bryan Kohberger's DNA was right underneath those fingernails. But if you recall, Vinny, earlier we learned that under Madison Mogen's fingernails, this was several months ago, we talked about it here on your show, they found the DNA of 3 people underneath her fingernails. And again, at that time, it was unclear whose DNA that was. Could it have been Bryan Kohberger? Could it have been Madison Mogen? Obviously, it would have been hers because they were her fingernails, but it could have been Kaylee's. So it seemed as if, to me, the fact that the prosecutors were planning to introduce that, the defense wanted to keep that out, and then here we have these new photos, these new images coming out of the fingernails, that there could have been some sort of expert that testified as to what type of DNA was under those nails and who it belonged to.
Joseph Scott Morgan, what are you taking away from the nail clippings in this case?
Well, here's the thing. Relative to the nail clippings, it's out of context relative to the hands, right? So most of the time, as was reported, traditionally when you think about nail clippings that we take in the morgue, and also nail scrapings, that's another thing we do, is that you think that the victim is fighting back, essentially dragging their hand over the face, the neck. I've seen them up and down arms before, and all the while, the nails are collecting this evidence, if you will, almost like a plow going through dirt. Here's the thing. We don't know, and the reason I said it's out of context, we don't know what the condition of the rest of the hands were. We only see the nails, okay? So if someone is touching their own body, and remember, these injuries are rather significant, if they're in the midst of touching their own body, you can have deposition under the nails and on the top side of the nails as well that might be their own blood. It doesn't necessarily mean it is DNA or biological tissue from the perpetrator. So we're kind of left in the lurch here, I think, as far as information goes, because we don't have a description of the hands necessarily. And that would be important. And also if we had photographs of the hands with the nails intact prior to clipping or scraping.
So Nate, I wanted to put together these first 2 segments we're talking about. The first was the knife sheath having blood DNA from all 4 victims, and then trying to piece that together with what happened here. And we just heard Cody talking about what Kaylee's sister said about potential experimental wounds. Is there any clarity about whether or not the killer went upstairs, committed some murder or murders, went downstairs, committed murders, and potentially went back upstairs?
I mean, it's possible, but you think of the timeline, Vinny, from the short amount of time that he was in the house, would he have been able to do all of that within that time? I guess potentially. You also think, too, would there have been blood dripped throughout the house if he's walking upstairs, downstairs, back upstairs, room to room? Is he leaving things on the railing, the banister? We've talked about before how there was DNA collected from the banister, fingerprints and swabs, things like that. That would have been a great question, and it would have been interesting to see how the prosecutors would have tied that all together, the exact moment by moment moving abouts in the home, if they would have ever been able to figure that out.
Joseph Scott Morgan, that term experimental wounds, does that have any significance to you? Have you used that term?
No, I've never used that term. The only thing that really jumped to mind, I'd heard somebody also use, and I don't know if this was a sister using this terminology or not, because that's not commonly something that we would say in the morgue or in forensic pathology. I'd also heard somebody say hesitation marks. Hesitation marks are generally associated with self-inflicted injuries where you have them on the wrist and the neck and that sort of thing. I got to tell you, the term that comes to mind for me, if you want to really, paint the picture here, is menacing. You can take this idea of experimentation, but I think that it borders, if that's what you're going to go with, you have to get into the area of torture here. But going to Nate's comment just a second ago, how much time does this guy actually have in the house? because we bracketed the time here. It's very, very narrow. So he's going to have time enough to do this in that space where he's, inflicting these non-lethal injuries. And how are these actually being described by the forensic pathologist? Because, in those terms, we would say that they are superficial sharp force injuries. We wouldn't use the term, like experimental. So I don't know what the source of that is necessarily.
All right, big thank you, Joseph Scott Morgan and Nate Eaton.
I believe that he was trying to mutilate her body. I believe that she was the target, and he was trying to, maybe she kind of brushed him off earlier in the evening, because reports say that they had like a run-in earlier in the evening at a taco stand or something after that. But I think that maybe he tried to come on to her or something, and she wasn't having it. So she may have been the target. I'm just speculating here, but from what I've heard, it sounds like it might be right. And the father said her body was completely mutilated, worse than all the others. So it's just horrible, horrific. And when this Lifetime movie comes out, I'd like to see it.
Body Bags Podcast, and of course, EastIdahoNews.com. Still to come, how shocking is it that no DNA evidence was found in the Elantra? I'm Vinny Politan. We continue our investigation of the mass murder of 4 University of Idaho students by a cold-blooded, awful man who wants to be famous, but if you've noticed, I never say his name. Here's the story. It was just before dawn in Moscow, Idaho, when the laughter and warmth of college life turned to unspeakable terror. Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, young, vibrant students, were found slain in their rented home near the campus. The nation demanded answers. Detectives followed a trail of DNA, a cell phone that went dark at key moments, and chilling surveillance of a car circling the block. Now, new evidence has finally been made public. What story does this evidence tell, and what questions does it finally answer? 2,400 pages released, unsealed, revealed to the public. Going through it tonight, some of the big pieces of evidence that have been uncovered here. So let's bring back in Court TV field reporter Cody Thomas, still with us. Let's talk about the car now. This was obviously a huge part of the case. What did we learn about the killer's Hyundai Elantra?
Well, Vinny hit the nail on the head. One of the hugest parts of this case, it was one of the main things linking him to the crime scene. Now, of course, we've seen multiple videos of that Elantra, that white Elantra, on surveillance in the hours and minutes before the murders took place. We saw the Elantra speeding off in the minutes after the murders took place. But now we're seeing new images of items and things from inside the car. So let's take a look. We see them on your screen now. That is one of the floor mats. You see the highlighting and where they, took swabs of testing and DNA. Another little bit of the floor mats there, including the drawing showing where trace evidence was collected. We see that investigators and forensic experts looked at a seatbelt in the car, brake and gas pedals in the car. There's a seatbelt now on the screen. They also tested some of his key fobs, Vinny, for DNA or any trace of anything. There's looks like the brake pedal there, brake pedal, gas pedal, seat belt, floor mats, all the things inside the car. Now, Vinny, this was a brutal stabbing of 4 different human beings. You'd imagine there'd be a lot of blood. I mean, gallons of blood everywhere, as egregious and nasty as that sounds. But they tested all kinds of stains, all the items we just saw on screen there. But according to these documents, there was no trace of any of the victim's DNA inside the killer's car whatsoever, which is just shocking given how gruesome these murders were.
We also have to remember that he was going for his master's or PhD actually in criminology. So he would know how to scrub a car. We also know that he scrubbed the car and cleaned it several times on the way to his family's house. So I believe he could have cleaned it up that good. Yes, I do.
Absolutely. I mean, for all of us, this is the piece of evidence we were talking about, looking for the white Elantra. We knew it was involved. We knew 4 lives were taken. So you would expect this to be almost like a traveling crime scene itself. Thanks, Cody. Nothing there. Brings us to the next question in our investigation. How shocking is it that no DNA evidence was found in the Elantra? Here to help answer that question, retired FBI agent Stuart Fillmore, and the host and creator of Gray Hughes Investigates on YouTube, Gray Hughes, is with us. Great to have you both here. Stuart, I'll begin with you. Should we be shocked?
I don't think so, Vinny. You know, the person that we won't say his name, he was obsessed with serial killers. I think he idolized Ted Bundy. Probably was a fan of Dexter. If you see in Dexter, you know, he always has his kill room lined with plastic. You know, one interesting thing is there's no blood trail leading from the back door or the kitchen door there, and you see the footprints in the snow. It almost makes me think that maybe he had some type of a hazmat suit on going in there, and maybe brought along a plastic bag with it, and he took the hazmat suit off before he left, put that in the plastic bag. That accounts for no blood trail, but you would think inside the house, you know, taking the plastic off would have created something obvious there on the floor. So it really is it really is kind of intriguing how he did this. So yeah, shocking is not really the word, because like I said, I think he thought he was going to commit the perfect crime, and so he had thought about these kind of things and really planned it.
Yeah, Gray Hughes, what are your thoughts about how he was able to do this? Because, you know, all the murder weapon, the clothes, none of this stuff has been recovered, and there was no evidence that could have been used to link him to the victims found inside of his car.
Really makes you think, what if there was a trial? Would he have gotten off? I mean, he only took the plea deal supposedly because his sister was on the witness list. He decided to take the plea 1 week after finding that out. So, I don't know. He may have gotten away with it if they had no evidence. I don't think he would have given his story. I don't think he would have admitted to it if the car wasn't found and he wasn't found throwing away evidence. So he might have been able to beat this. So it might have been best to take the plea in this case.
Well, I too think that he probably set something up at the car before going in. For example, I think he got there, parked around 4:08, and I don't think he entered the house until about 4:12 or 4:13. And then when he left, it was like 4:18. And so he doesn't leave at a high rate of speed until 4:20 and 47 seconds. So that means there's a, good 2 minutes by the time when he gets to his car before he took off. So I think there was a lot of blood spatter mitigation prior and after. I can't explain why there aren't footprints all over the place, but he might not have stepped in blood. I mean, that's the thing. Is like everybody thinks that when you look at the crime scene photos, there wasn't blood all over the floor like some, version of the movie Carrie or something like that. It wasn't like that. So it's possible that he was able to avoid stepping on blood. I mean, most of the victims were on beds, right? So the blood was on the bed. So likely wasn't even on the floor. And we know Bill Thompson told us that looks like Kohberger's car was taken apart and cleaned because there wasn't little elements of dust or anything where you would normally see buildup in a car over time. So it seems like Kohberger spent the month and a half, cleaning his car meticulously so that when they finally went and took it apart and tried to find any items of blood, there wasn't any. And not only that, he mitigated putting any blood in the vehicle after the murders as well. So,
Stuart, how different do you think this would have been if he had been pulled over and caught that night For whatever reason, he was stopped,
Wow,
and
that's-
they were able to seize the car that night.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the $64,000 question. I think that would answer a lot of things that we have to unfortunately speculate about now. No doubt, I think that time before he turns the phone back on and the cell tower picks him up south of Moscow, he got rid of any clothes, any mitigation of the blood, that and the knife. That is buried somewhere along that route. I know it's been searched for, but I fully believe that's what he did in that time frame. So yeah, if a patrol officer rolled up on him at that point, it would have definitely changed the case.
Gray, despite the fact that no DNA is found in the car ends up being, I would say, the second most important thing, right? The knife sheath is the big one, right? And the DNA on the knife sheath. But the car is so important because it ties, the car puts him at the scene outside the house and kind of connects the knife sheath to everything else.
Yeah, exactly. I think I've done little debates on my show about which one could you make a case without the other one. Like, for example, if you have the knife sheath with just DNA, but there was no extra information about him traveling there or being there with a knife sheath or a cell phone or something like that, I mean, you could make sort of a case in there saying, hey, we don't know, touch DNA, etc. But once you have the white Elantra missing a front plate like his, because in Pennsylvania you don't need a front license plate, it's driving around, and that matches up with Kohberger. And then his phone turns on south, I think it was about 20-something minutes after the homicide, 25, and he should have been there. There's about 16 minutes of missing time before getting there if he drove down the highway like they drew in the probable cause document. But, it's an interesting sort of debate, is which element's more important, because I think you could make a really strong circumstantial case with the cell phone data and the white Elantra, but if you only had the knife and not the Elantra and the cell phone data, how does it place him at the scene physically, other than the DNA on the sheath, I guess?
Yeah, it's
really an interesting. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, interesting concept, because this is like the ultimate circumstantial case, Stuart, where you've got to put the pieces together, and they do fit. I mean, it all fits together once you lay them out.
That's absolutely true. And, many times circumstantial evidence, when you have sufficient amount of it, I think can be much more damning than direct evidence. So in this case, everything did fit together, as you said. And you probably could have worked one without the other. Would have taken more work, more legwork, a little more difficult to show. But as it worked out, good thing. There was a good case against the guy, and he ended up pleading. Unfortunately, we never got his statement, and I don't know if we ever will.
Yeah. Gray, how much do you think it bothers him every single day that he left the knife sheath there? Because it seems so much went into hiding everything and making sure there was no...
I don't know. I think he might have done it for the fame. This guy is a complete psychopath. I mean, look at his eyes. The reason I do these videos is for the victims, not for him at all. Not for Chris Watts, not for Nicole Kessinger, any of those. I mean, of course I want her to serve her time, but anyway, getting back to this, it was Zaina, Maddie, Kaylee, and Ethan who ultimately lost their lives that night, that shouldn't have never lost their lives. Beautiful people, and they're taken away from us way too soon. They have their whole lives ahead of them. It's horrible, it's sad, and just pray for the victims and their families.
Evidence, and he left his DNA underneath one of the victims.
Well, I mean, I'm actually one of the people out there that believes he left the sheath there as I guess you could call it a calling card. Like, he literally left it there saying, he thought he was going to get away with it, and he cleaned it all except for one little spot on the button snap. And I think that makes it even worse. But either way, he's sitting there, and his whole life he'll realize that his mistake of leaving the knife sheath there is really what led directly to him. You know, I mean, so the thing is, if you didn't have the knife sheath, and let's say you had just the sheath, but his DNA wasn't on it, I think you could still make a strong case because of the Amazon orders, the knife sharpener, etc., that he purchased. But yeah, it's just, I think he's definitely just sitting around just going,
Yeah,
God, I blew it.
And I think without the DNA, I don't think there's a plea. I bet there's absolutely a trial. Big thanks, Stuart Fillmore, Gray Hughes. Make sure you check out Gray Hughes Investigates on YouTube. Great to have you both here. Coming up next, our...
Okay, this part is over. What do you think about what he just said? Do you think there can now be a trial after he took a plea? That doesn't sound right to me. Something's weird about that, but possibly. I mean, the families do deserve to find out exactly what happened and why they were targeted. I would like to find out, and I would like the families to know. So, all right, guys, I'm really going to bed. So, good night. I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.